I really want to make sure that I'm understanding you before I go to the next question. So bear with me
Yeah.
because I have clearly turned this into my own therapy and I am unapologetic and I'm going to just own it. This is We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling, where I give you the tools and skills you need to love better so you can live better. Dating today rewards the loudest person in the room, the most charismatic, the wittiest texter, the one who can banter like they're auditioning for a Netflix special. But what if you're not that person? What if you or the person you're dating needs quiet to reset, depth instead of small talk, fewer people, longer pauses, and zero pressure to perform? I know a thing or two about introverts, mostly from marrying one, and then from having a daughter who is basically a smaller version of my wife. Introverts aren't broken, they're not disinterested, they're just wired differently. But if you don't know how to read the signals, you can mistake space for rejection and silence for a lack of interest. In this episode, I am joined by Dr. Laurie Helgoe, a psychologist and author whose research on introversion has redefined how we understand them. She's here to help us unpack the myths, the realities, and the relationship challenges that introverts face in a world built for extroverts. Because meaningful connection shouldn't require you to become someone that you're not. Dr. Laurie Helgoe, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So let's start with the most basic thing. How do we define an introvert?
So it's pretty simple when you boil it down. It's simply inward orientation. So an introvert tends to process information internally, privately, to wait until they're ready to make it known to the world, whereas an extrovert is externally oriented. So they are more inclined to move quickly into the external world to process things, seek rewards by engaging, getting feedback, getting something back. So it's that has all kinds of repercussions for how introverts and extroverts are different.
That is so interesting. I had never thought of it that way. Extroverts seek rewards by socializing through socializing.
Mhm.
And I, as a hybrid, leaning more towards the extroversion side, but not the certainly I am no extrovert. I am absolutely a hybrid, but more of an extrovert than I am of an introvert. You're absolutely right. I 100% seek external validation. I seek all the aspects that we know through learning theory that we get by
Mhm.
another person. And is what you're saying that an introvert does not look outside themselves for a lot of that?
Yeah, and it's not hard and fast. It's as you know, it's not binary, but there is that. Yeah, there is that sense, and a good example of a study that showed that is that um, looking at flowers or people faces, introverts, yeah, they might like one or the other, not a big preference. Extroverts went for the face. So there is this sense that the introverts are not as interested, and sometimes it gets in the way to get social feedback. It's like we want to think our own thoughts, and there's that process can take a little bit longer because we also like to finish our thoughts before we share them. So if you're working out your thoughts interactively, you don't have that same need to kind of keep it closed up as long.
That's interesting. How do you identify on the introversion extroversion spectrum?
I'm definitely lean toward, I'm probably, the other side of the bell curve from you, in that I lean toward introvert for sure. And I think, as actually a lot of introverts, I can play extrovert. And there are ways that I am more extroverted because I like to perform, I like to teach. But when I'm tired, when I'm, need to refuel, I definitely go away, leave me alone. And I also do like slower conversations to allow myself time to dig into that inner laboratory and figure out what I want to say.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of my holiday dinner table. I'm known for hosting holidays here. And whenever we have a guest that's not normally seated at the dining room table, I'm very mindful of the fact that we are a loud group. Now, not everybody's an extrovert. My wife is an introvert. My daughter's an introvert. I have a cousin that's an introvert. We know each other well enough, obviously, so that when we get together, we don't necessarily look very different. They look very similar to the way I look. I'm more of an extrovert than an introvert, but I'm a hybrid. But when we have a guest at our table, particularly if I sense that the person is introverted, I will be mindful of the fact that they will get half a thought out of their head before people will jump in, hijack the conversation, and bring it in a different direction. And oftentimes they never get a chance to finish their thought. And I'm aware of wanting to come back to the person, maybe because I know how to run groups.
Right.
But also because I'm truly curious to hear what they had to say, and I want them to be able to finish their sentence. Is that what you were trying to describe? That there's a propensity for introverts to not be able to finish their thoughts?
Yeah, I think in the context of extroverts, for sure. I grew up in a family of 10. We weren't all in the same, I was number 9. We were all in the same house at once, but it was a very kind of, loud place. And I actually learned, so a friend pointed this out to me later on. I would stop sentences or thoughts midway, expecting somebody to interrupt me because I got so used to it growing up. So, so I think when that happens, an introvert often just like, I don't want to bother. It's just like, it's too much work.
That really sucks. That sucks. So if
Yeah.
you and I were at a table together having a conversation and you paused and I encouraged you to continue, how would that land for you?
I think that would be fine as long as the encouragement didn't feel like pressure and I felt like I had enough room. And sometimes introverts will kind of test that, like, are you really going to listen? And clients will do this. I found, like maybe put something out there that's not too important and see, you're going to wait. Are you going to wait till I get to the good stuff? And if not, you failed the test and we're probably not going to go very deep.
Right. Or like you would put out like the headline and to see if the person shows any interest. That's so interesting. You're right. Introverts, they get a bad rap. I don't have to tell you that. They get a bad rap. They're often misunderstood or labeled as hard to read or emotionally unavailable or even as cold. And to be fair, they can read that way. I am married to one, and I am constantly asking my wife if she's okay because she has such a poker face. The more I ask, sometimes the more clammed up she becomes. And so the less I'll get, and I've come to realize that sometimes feels to her like I'm pressuring her, even though I don't mean to be pressuring her. So can you explain when an introvert is being asked to explain themselves or to reassure the person they're speaking to or to, heaven forbid, perform emotion? And I'm condescending here. I'm condescending here because honestly, it sucks to be the person in the room who's just like, can I just get an emotive sense, please, so that I can feel attuned to you? So I don't mean to sound like the douchebag that I hear that I'm sounding like. I'm aware of what I sound like. And I am going to label it that. What is the introvert experiencing when that is what's being asked of them? When they're being asked to reassure the person in the room and to, perform attunement or emotion.
Right. I think to start, what might be a part of the resistance, to respond to that by an introvert is that there's an assumption that they aren't just attuned. And I think there really is a way, and I totally agree that introverts have great poker faces. When I teach, my introverts, even though I'm an introvert, my introvert students can be the ones that are challenging to me because I don't know if they're getting it. I don't know if they're responding. And yet, I think that often the way that introverts attune is to kind of go inside, to be thinking about what you're saying, to kind of be processing it. So my husband and I, it wasn't until we were married 20 plus years, and we finally had this conversation where I explained to him that when I pause, it's not an invitation for him to talk.
I mean, I can imagine needing the memo on that myself.
Because if he talks, then it interrupts my inner flow. And I have to then kind of start over. And he, so it feels like an interruption, even though he doesn't see it that way. Of course he doesn't, because I am, I'm silent. Or else he thinks he has to explain what he's saying, which is even worse. Yeah.
I'm having such a light bulb moment now. I need you to know this happens. So we're not married 20 years yet. My wife and I are married. It'll be 16 years in September. I constantly do this to her, Laurie, and she feels like I rupture the conversation. And when I tell you from the bottom of my heart, all I'm trying to do is perform the attunement that I want in return. That is what I want from her.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing from you is that when I do that, what I do oftentimes is I'll ask clarifying questions as a way of communicating to her, I'm in this with you, baby. I am in this with you. I'm interested. I'm hanging on your every word. But what I'm actually doing is I'm rupturing it for her. And although I've known that intellectually, I don't think I understood it the way I think I'm understanding it more. Can you tell me a little bit more so that you might be saving us like the next round of couples therapy? Please help us.
Sure. Happy to do it. Yeah. So yeah, and I think there's ways on both sides that can be ameliorated. But yeah, I think that the idea is that the more that there's a sense of somebody pulling something out of you, I think even though it's well intentioned, you have good facilitation skills, all those things. It's stimulation, and introverts have a tendency. There's a lot of stimulation already going on for us, and so the more that adds to that, the harder it is for our thoughts to flow. And so it's kind of a diminishing return to ask for, what you're looking for. Just wait for it.
Wow. It's so interesting because obviously introverts, and certainly my wife, the introvert, is so differently wired than I am. I also get annoyed by clarifying questions until I'm done with the thought because I have ADHD and it feels disruptive and I forget where I left off. It is overstimulating to me as well. But I would like them every now and then so that I know that, and this doesn't happen for clients and students listening to this, I'm not talking about you guys. I know you're plugged in with me. This is interpersonal in my personal life. I often can't tell if someone's fully plugged in. I can't always tell. And some of it is that, I'm surrounded by introverts or hybrids at best, or at most, not at best, because, there's not a right or a wrong way to look at it. So just holding space is enough. And you wouldn't be wondering if I said nothing in return, whether or not I was like going through my grocery list in my head.
So, no, I would love that. I do think I would attune to, do you appear to be listening? Are there those nonverbal cues? Those are helpful, I think. I think that the other side, because I want to be fair, is that it's fair to also want, that those cues from the introvert. And the other thing I've learned is from, my husband and we kind of debrief on this, is that I have a responsibility to kind of narrate my introversion, to tell them a little bit about, my process. So, I can say, hold on, I'm thinking about what you're saying. I mean, I can do that.
That is so helpful. That is
Yeah.
so helpful. I had a client years ago who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And if I asked him a question, he would look away and he would say, I'm thinking, Darcy. That was such a relief to me. I could hold space for that indefinitely. Sometimes we would sit, I would wait minutes for him to gather his thoughts, as long as I knew what was happening.
Right. Yeah. 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 I think I mean, there's other ways too that I've learned that, I think that the problem, there's that golden rule thing that like, love the way you want to be loved or treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, that doesn't work when you're wired differently. Because if I wait, like I listen the way I want to be listened to, my husband thinks I'm disengaged. He wants me to be, more engaged. And if he asks questions, he's curious, he's interested, that doesn't work for me. So we have to kind of do some negotiating around how we communicate.
So when she tells me a story, what do you want me to do? Straight up. Let just like give me something, a canned response. In all likelihood, I haven't tried it because because I just do the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different response, to be perfectly honest with you. I just continue to love her the way I want her to love me, and it does not work. She clams up. She feels pressured. She feels irritated by my questions, and she's never been able to communicate it this way. So what should I do instead? I'm going to tell myself internally, she's plugged in. She's having her own internal process. Don't disrupt her. And then what else can I do other than shut
In fact, along your point, my husband will actually say, "Oh, you're thinking about it, right?" Yep.
Oh, I can say it too, because she never says it. And you're not supposed to say that, kids. Do not say things like never and always.
Oh, right.
My listeners know not to do that. I made a mistake. She rarely does that. She rarely narrates, I'm thinking. And so I can say, you're thinking? That's so great. Give me one more.
Yeah.
One more.
And I think the other thing is just, do some breathing. Look at her. Notice, think of her as a work of art and just practice observational skills. Because I think if there is anxiety about kind of maintaining the thread, extroverts take too much responsibility for that, honestly. Like, let her do it. Let her maintain the thread. And she'd probably be happy that you did.
She will be so relieved for anything new, I can assure you. She'll be so grateful for this conversation. And what am I doing to feel better connected to her?
Like, what should you do, you mean?
Correct. Not what am I doing? Yeah. What should I be doing?
Okay. Yeah. There is this kind of fine line where introverts like to be invited, just not pressured. So I think, like, I'm just curious what's going on in there. Maybe kind of a welcoming thing. And the other thing is just to own what it is you need. It's like, I know I'm interrupting your thought right now. I just really need you to smile at me.
Or make a modicum of eye contact.
Yeah. But if it's about you, rather than, I think introverts are so often pathologized for just who they are. Okay. So I think if it's like, oh, what's wrong? Why are you, and recognizing that it's not about you at all. If anything, there is a lot of times, interest in understanding you, but that it really is just the way we think and the way we have to like go down in the basement and find our thoughts through the files. We have this process that's a little more complicated, but you'll get better stuff back because of that.
I really want to make sure that I'm understanding you before I go to the next question. So bear with me.
Yeah.
Because I have clearly turned this into my own therapy, and I am unapologetic, and I'm going to just own it. So what I tend to do is I tend to say, are you okay? And the answer is almost always, yeah, I'm fine, with a look of confusion on her face. Instead of looking outward, is what you're saying that I should tell her what I need instead?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I think the question that if we get asked so often if we're okay. And in fact, it's kind of a vicious circle because if we are asked if we're okay, then we're like, oh, am I okay? And we can interpret our own cues in a pathologizing way and feel bad about ourselves. So it's all kinds of things that aren't helpful. So yeah, I think it's so much more helpful to just say what you need. Yeah.
I'm going to have to go back to this conversation and take notes. I'm not lying. I'm literally going to have to take notes on my own podcast episode because it's so important to me that I begin doing this differently. It's interesting. I don't have this problem with my daughter, who is a bigger introvert than my wife. My wife is pretty far on the introvert spectrum. My daughter is a couple degrees further, but I don't have trouble with her. I know that when she comes home to visit, she's a young adult. So when she comes home, the first thing she wants is a nap. Go to your room. Like, you don't have to entertain me. I give her her own space. There's never a sense I know what she needs. There's never a sense that I need her to be with me immediately. I want her to take care of herself and decompress because she's just gotten off a plate and she's traveled. And even though she's good at it, I imagine it's exhausting. And so she goes up to her room, she does whatever she does, and hours later, she comes down and we have a meal together. And I don't put a fraction of the pressure on her to perform that I do on my wife.
Yeah. Well, we expect a lot from our life partners, right? I mean, yeah.
And I still see her as a work in progress. My daughter. I see her as somebody who's ever evolving. And I just know that about her. And I just know that it's never about me. I don't know why I personalize it with Steph. I know it's never about me. Anyway, okay, we're going to zoom out a little bit because it's a little too deep for me. Ready?
Okay. Sounds good.
The early stages of dating are often filled with crowds and small talk and a lot of required communication, which I would imagine is basically an introvert's worst case scenario. What are some realistic ways that introverts can date without burning out?
First of all, I would say to not necessarily choose places with a lot of noise and crowds and such to seek relationships. If they're places you wouldn't frequent except to find somebody to connect with, that's a problem. So I think there is this idea that, to find, connect with somebody, somehow you have to play extrovert. That is such a problem from the outside because you're false advertising. You're likely to connect with somebody who might not be the person. Now, sometimes there are exceptions, of course. You may have a friend who knows somebody and they're going to be at this event. And so that's one thing. But I would say in terms of choosing how you meet somebody, think about what settings you like, what settings, what interests you have. I think introverts often are more connected through ideas than they are through just kind of social banter. And so, taking a class or volunteering or doing something, going on some kind of a backpacking trip or, I don't know. There's so many things that might actually get you in the zone of somebody that you would have an instant conversation with around ideas rather than around like, what do you do for a living kind of thing.
The small talk is torturous
It
for
is.
everyone, for most people.
I agree. I think it is for everybody.
But especially for an introvert, it's got to be torture.
It is. Yeah. So that I think is one really important thought. I think introverts, because we are very comfortable hanging alone, that we can also kind of underthink how we want to be socially or leave it up to others. And so I think owning responsibility for that, like I have become much more forthcoming. If work colleagues want to go to happy hour, I'm like, not me, but let's do co-working at a coffee shop and, just hang together, to actually say, yeah, I'm interested in connecting. I do it differently.
Do you think introverts have a greater propensity to accommodate others?
I mean, there's a lot of variations in how introverts are in that regard, but I do think that there is just probably a way that we have learned that this is an extrovert kind of dominated culture, not in terms of numbers. Let me be clear that we live in a culture that values extroversion in a way that it doesn't for introversion. Um, so that I think we have kind of learned to just kind of give over space, give over a lot.
Choices in how you want to interact and
Mhm.
socialize.
Yeah.
So if my introverts are listening, the idea is to think through what are some naturally enjoyable activities that you regularly engage in when you're thinking about going on a date.
Yeah. I mean, it takes so much pressure off. But the idea is that, if we are operating with our weakest assets, and in the world, we're not going to do so well. So it isn't, as opposed to being in a space where we feel comfortable, where we feel like we have enough room to be who we are. So we might be, in order to navigate crowds, kind of sending out a part of ourselves that's really not as into it, not as skilled. So we don't have that much energy. We're kind of like just getting through it.
Kind of checking a box.
Yeah.
And did I hear you correctly that it can almost be an unsustainable expectation that the introvert unintentionally communicates by even engaging in, a first date at a crowded bar or something like that? Like they're unintentionally communicating that this is something that they can do when in fact it's not something that they're interested in maintaining on a long-term basis?
Yeah, yeah, I think that is really, I mean, so the example I think of is that even if you decline an invitation, I use this example in my book, is that like your colleagues are going out to happy hour. I often think at happy hour because that's my one like first level of hell for me. Unless I'm with a really intimate group and we're really connected and we can regress together. But I don't want to regress with people I don't know. Yeah. So anyway, somebody, the group is gung ho, they want you to come. And it's very common for introverts to like, oh, make an excuse. Oh, I'd love to come, but I've got this thing, or, kind of, I'm such a loser because I've got this or that. I mean, that's kind of like in there. And so that then they'll keep getting invited, or there's this assumption that I know you really wanted to come last time. And then it's like, okay, so then there's more pressure. So, it's a lie for one thing. We're lying about who we are when we do that. And so, yeah, why wouldn't people continue to harangue us about going to happy hour? So instead, if we said, yeah, sounds like you guys are really excited and you're going to have a good time, and I can't wait to get home and get back to my book, or, go for a run or hang out with my dog. I got this series I'm watching, whatever it is. And then what you'll find is that about two or three people in the group are like, oh gosh, that sounds really good. And so you're advertising yourself differently. You're not lying. And next time, maybe, people would get it. It's like, oh, I bet you want to, you want to get back to that book or whatever.
And so maybe the introvert, one of the things that my wife doesn't look like an introvert when we host. Part of the reason we host, I think, I'm starting to understand a lot about our dynamic in our family. Part of the reason why we host is because it's more comfortable for both of us. I like food a certain way. And I think Steph just does better in the house. She just does better on her own turf, and
Yes.
with people that she has invited in.
Sure.
And so instead of looking for activities outside, probably just fine to host.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And that when we, there's a certain amount of comfort needed to, I think, for an introvert to kind of feel like there's space. It's always that sense of there being space for our thoughts, for our process.
And this
Yeah.
sense that if you go to an environment that you don't necessarily have control over the amount of people that will be invited, that there won't be space. Is that the sense?
There's a lot of stimulation then to process. Okay. You're in a new place. You don't know, you're kind of sizing up people. There's just a lot that then becomes more salient than maybe your own kind of just that I think introverts really like to access that inner space. And so whatever gets in the way of that can be a problem and a stressor. And it can look like social anxiety. And sometimes it is, but a lot of times it isn't. It's just like, there's just too much. And I'm focused out here when I really want to be in here.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because you have written that introverts experience more brain activity in social situations than extroverts. So I am curious, what is happening neurologically and how does that show up in dating patterns?
So I will give you a very crude version of neurological, what happens neurologically, because I'm not a neuropsychologist, but just reading through the research consistently, there's a sense that introverts have more cortical activity, probably at a resting level. There's certainly a lot of evidence of that.
Cortisone levels are higher in introverts than in extroverts?
The cortical brain activity. Well, we do know, like from fMRI studies, that when they look at the brain while introvert is being exposed to new stimulation, then there definitely is more activity. And what's interesting about extroverts versus introverts is that when extroverts have that stimulation, there are the dopaminergic pathways, the ones that seek rewards out there, are activated. So extroverts, when they're stimulated, when there's external stimulation, they want to move out. They want to respond. Whereas introverts just get kind of overloaded. And so, and again, this is very crude neurology, but there is a lot, there's been a lot of investigations of that. And way back when Hans Eyck talked about this idea of optimal arousal, mental arousal, like for doing things, and he proposed, and there really hasn't been a lot of dispute to that with the research that's come out, is that introverts in a resting place are kind of fine. They have a pretty good level of stimulation. Extroverts tend to be more bored. And so
100%. Yeah.
They're going to seek more stimulation, get more in that middle of that optimal arousal. Introverts need to turn it down to get to the same place. We both want the same thing, but we need to go to different places, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the early attachment studies on children, the stranger experiment, where wasn't it Bowlby, the stranger experiment? I don't think it was Ainsworth.
Okay.
I might be butchering it. I'll have the answer in the show notes. We're going to not get bogged down in the weeds here. One of those two theorists wanted to study different attachment styles in babies. And so he would invite these mothers with newborns in, and then he would have a strange woman come in to hold the infant, and the mother would leave for about a minute, and they would measure the infant's heart rate, blood pressure, so on and so forth, and their behavior while their mother was away. Mother was probably away more than 60 seconds, probably away like 5 minutes, something like that. And what they learned is that in the children who had avoidant attachment styles, they looked so disinterested in their parent leaving, but there was so much more neurologically and in terms of the nervous system going on with them than even with the anxiously attached children, because they were at least expressing their needs. and not just dysregulated internally. And
Right.
that's what your analogy reminds me of. And I'm not intending to imply that there might be a correlation between introverts and people who have avoidant attachment styles, but similar to how both of those people may present, they may present as quite stoic, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah. And getting into development, I mean, we could go down a whole rabbit hole because I think there is that whole issue of kind of mirroring and kind of attunement with parental figures. And if there is a temperament style of being very sensitive, which introverts tend to be to stimuli, and a parent who's kind of too much in the face of that child, there will be kind of this pulling away.
Back. Yeah. And it's so interesting when I think about my mother versus Steph's mother. Steph's mother was so warm and outgoing and a little too much. And my mother was a workaholic and I was always reaching for her.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Yeah.
Not too much empathy, Laurie. I can't take it. Little doses.
Okay, sorry.
Little doses. No, it's okay. It's okay. You know, I don't just talk about mental health. I live it. And in my 20s, I built a boutique private practice that reflects the kind of therapy I always needed. It's called Alternatives Counseling, and we are now accepting new clients. If you've ever listened to this podcast and thought, I wish I had someone to walk me through this in real life, that is exactly what we do. We work with individuals and couples, especially high achievers, who are killing it in their careers and want that same success in their personal lives. We help you build deeper, healthier connections without losing yourself in the process. This is evidence-based therapy delivered by licensed therapists who are the best of the best. Change is hard. Doing it alone is harder. Come do the work with us at alternativescounseling.com. I am curious, so how does this brain activity, this increase in brain activity that introverts have a propensity to experience, what does that mean in terms of dating when they go up, like, say, on a first date? Do they tend to pull back? Are they slower to reply verbally or?
Yeah. So there are different kind of subtypes of introverts, and I don't get too much into that, but I think it's relevant in terms of introverts. Like for me, I've had, a lot. I was a pastor's kid, so I learned how to smile and do the thing because like pastors' kids are always on display. But so there is some way that a lot of introverts can play that kind of initial stuff to get to better stuff. So there's degrees of that. And then I call like accessible introverts who can just get overwhelmed because they're, kind of good listeners and kind of, socially very engaging. And then there's what I call like the shadow dwellers. And I kind of envy those because I'm more the accessible one, but the shadow dwellers who really, really do not like that kind of being out there at all. And like, you need to come in the shadows with me, just sit, maybe I'll talk to you. So some of that varies, but I would say that in a dating situation, I mean, it's overwhelming for most people. Like if you don't know somebody very well, or you're just kind of getting to know somebody. But I think for an introvert, it's probably more work in a way, just because it's like, I just want to be comfortable. I just don't want to go through these steps.
Yeah.
I don't know that answer your question at all, because yeah.
It spawned another one.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, do you think that introverts are better off dating other introverts?
See, this is the weird thing, because it's like, I'm married to an extrovert. You're married to an introvert. There's a lot of that kind of opposite attracts things. I would say that if you're going to engage with somebody who's on the other end of the spectrum or on the other end of the hump anyway,
Yeah.
um, you have to expect to have more conflict and work through more. And I mean, for me, with my husband, like I say, we're coming up actually on 42 years of marriage. We um we're a high conflict couple, and it's like an ongoing therapy relationship because we have to work things through. And so I think what I see about my friends who are in introvert relationships is that there is just kind of a more of a shared reality,
Hmm.
but maybe not so much kind of like working through challenge kind of that you get with the introvert extrovert thing. And there's also some advantages, like my husband's going to be the one to answer the door or to, talk. He'll kind of front for me and allow me to hide, which is lovely.
I think what I hear you saying is that in every long term relationship, of course, there's areas for growth and conflict that we're constantly navigating, but that when you date and enter a relationship with someone on the other side of the bell curve, the hump, as you said, the
Mhm.
other end of the spectrum, an introvert dating an extrovert or vice versa, you're going to have incompatibilities that are going to result in ongoing need to negotiate compromise,
Mhm.
which can be a strain.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because my husband and I, there's so many ways we don't like doing a lot of the same things. I'm like, how did we work this out? But um, I remember doing a study of like 50-year plus marriages. And I remember it was a, older generation, of course. And they would say, why does these younger people feel like you have to do everything together all the time?
Right. I was
And
curious, do you guys find yourselves doing different activities?
absolutely. I mean, it's how we survive. I mean, he has to get out more than me, and he has to have
Yeah.
more social interaction. And I need him to leave. So he is a really good poker
That's
player, and
amazing.
he goes and plays poker. He gets a social interaction. I get the house to myself. I get the remote. I get the couch. It's great. And then we can compare notes and reconnect. But yeah, we're not sitting you know, right next to each other all the time. And that's fine.
You guys have independent lives in
Yeah.
addition to the relationship, the life of the relationship that you share.
Yeah. Yeah. And what kind of it's kind of in a long-term marriage, it's kind of nice to be a little bit of an enigma to each other because it keeps it interesting. As long as it's not something that you're trying to fix each other. We know that doesn't work.
Yeah. It certainly keeps it interesting. So we've talked about how introverts are often misread as aloof or maybe emotionally flat, which can look like they're disinterested when they're on a date. What are a few reasonable things that an introvert can do to communicate that they're interested?
Yeah, I think self-awareness is really huge. I think introverts it helps to be aware that how they project may not be aligned with who they are, what they feel, and that they may need to actually I work with students, when I train them to do therapy, it's like, yes, you need to nod, you need to widen your eyes, do these things. And it's almost like there is definitely room for that to kind of modify that poker face. So
Right.
that's one thing that can be done. I think the other thing is that now I think thankfully there is more of a language for us to talk about who we are.
Mhm.
So in an early stage to say, hey, I'm an introvert. And so I don't always give the best cues about what I'm thinking. And to just start off the bat to say that. Again, what might happen is that other person who's acting might say, oh,
I
phew,
can I
I'm
can
an
I can
introvert
chill.
too.
I can chill
Yeah.
out a little bit. I don't have to give you as much as I would have to give an introvert extrovert.
Yeah. So I think that, the kind of the tension between modifying a little bit to kind of reach over, but also saying, yeah, here, this is who I am, and this is what I like. And I only came here because I knew that, my friend was going to introduce us, but I really hate this noise. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if you're going to be that bold because introverts are a little bit more cautious, but
Right.
yeah.
Right. So naming it and also understanding that there's an adaptability that is necessary, especially early on. You
Mhm,
have to nod. You have to make eye contact, not in a creepy way. It's not to
mhm.
say that you don't break eye contact. Even in this conversation, I'm constantly breaking eye contact.
Yeah,
For those of you who are just listening to audio, to gather my thoughts. That's quite human,
right.
and it tends to make people more comfortable, not less, rather than the
Yeah,
creepy stare. But
right.
some eye contact is important because as mammals, that's what we do. We seek out each other's eyes
Mhm. Yeah,
to
yeah,
know that the person is plugged into what we're saying.
yeah, absolutely. And I think the other part of all this for introverts to remember is that we have a lot of assets. I mean, the fact that we can be quiet and be comfortable in a quiet space and to kind of wait for somebody else to finish their thoughts. I mean, giving people an opportunity to express themselves is a huge plus. And you know that the blowhard that's going to be talking the whole time on a date is not going to get a second date unless somebody, is into that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
one of the things that I've encouraged introverts to do over the years is have some canned questions so that the pressure's off of you. People are
Mhm.
dying to talk about themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And if you can ask the questions, it really will do so much to take the pressure off of you, but more importantly, communicate to the other person that you're curious about them.
Right. Right. And I do think I think about my husband because he asks a lot of questions more than,
More than you would
uh,
want?
more than I want. I mean, he's a lawyer, so he can, there's that interrogation kind of feel sometimes, but people do mostly appreciate it. But he will say if somebody doesn't ask a question, it's like, you know, why didn't they, ask about me, kind of thing. And I'm like, I'm thinking about myself, and I usually wait, because I like to just let people, talk. So that, yeah, I think knowing kind of who we are, what our assets are, but also knowing what's on the other list that we can definitely do those things. There's even research that shows, introverts can completely pull off acting like extroverts. I mean, we're kind of taught to be bilingual in that regard.
Right.
So yeah, so we can do that. And we don't have to like it, but it can help.
Because I don't always like it.
Mhm.
I love this forum. It's once a week. I get to be super curious and I do have to be plugged in. I have to be more mindful of myself than normal. I do try not to interrupt, despite the evidence to the contrary where it may exist. Um, and but outside of here, I find it incredibly draining to deliver
Mhm.
this level of attunement
Yeah,
on an ongoing basis.
right.
That's why the therapy hour is so perfect for me, because I can do it for
Mm.
60 minutes and then
Yeah,
I'm done, and I can
right.
just collapse on my couch. Not that I necessarily do that in between sessions, because oftentimes, I'll leave a session and I'll feel pretty inspired by the work that my client and I just did.
Mhm.
But there's an exit, unlike a
Yeah,
social event where there often is not an end in sight.
right. And sometimes those exits are helpful to build in, especially if you're not sure you want to be, stay it through. But yeah.
What are some ways that introverts can build in breaks so that they can get a gasp of oxygen while
Yeah.
having to socialize?
Yeah. So we often do that through like bathroom breaks. So, yeah, having a nice restroom handy is definitely an asset. But no, beyond that, I think that there is there is a way that nonverbals can provide that. I mean, there's a way that looking up or just, kind of like, there are ways that you can cue that I'm thinking. And
Like with
again,
hand
sometimes,
gestures, as if like you're
yeah,
thinking, like as
yeah,
if you're
like,
holding up a
oh,
finger.
yeah, looking
Yeah.
away. Yeah. So there are those things that if somebody is attuned at all, if the problem is that if they're not attuned, they really are not a good person for you because some people do not read cues at all, um, and that becomes another. They may just not be as attuned to sharing space, or just they don't really care. If you want to listen, they're just going to talk, and that's going to be torture for an introvert. So that's the other part that I think helps introverts so much is to see yourself as an observer. You're in it, but allow a part of yourself to sit back and observe, and as if you're filming it, filming the date, or you're telling the story, you're researching, you're a reporter, because that can also be an internal way you build space.
Right. It's a distancing technique that we use in therapy, especially trauma therapy, especially like EMDR. We help
Right.
people come up with ways in which they can distance themselves from, very painful moments of a memory that we might be reprocessing, so that they can tolerate the discomfort. So what you're saying is to imagine yourself either watching the whole experience, maybe watching the video re-record or refilm, watching the video, going
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
videotape to watch what is happening, imagining yourself watching the whole thing through a third lens, or imagining yourself filming it, or imagining that you're like a scientist taking notes on the whole
Right.
process of what you're experiencing right now. So there's there's a dual focus. There's a separate part of you that is somewhat removed from the experience and able to breathe without scrutiny.
Yes, exactly. And I use that advice. A lot of people, like if they're going home to, be with family, and it's like, and I'm like, well, what if you just went as if you were going to report on this? And it does it gives that a little bit of cushion between you and the experience.
As if you're a journalist.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, and if you take that kind of removed perspective, um, it makes it one more interesting. And it's like if it goes sour, it's a good story. It always
That's
is a
so
good,
good.
it's maybe a
Yeah.
better story.
Would it be helpful for an introvert to actually build in an exit, a hard end to a date?
Yeah. So I think that that's the other part, right? Is that introverts can be very engaged at the get-go. And this is one thing that distinguishes introverts from shy people, because shy people might warm up and get more engaged, whereas an introvert who's not shy may engage very well in the beginning, but start to get tired. Also, there can be a little bit of a panic, probably for anybody, but for an introvert even more, if it's not going well. And if there is some way that it's hard to extract themselves. So I think building in something that, or just making it, the structure of it shorter to start with is really, really helpful. So that you can kind of get a taste, you can kind of get in, and then have that time to pull back so that before you re-engage.
So, not a tasting menu, perhaps a cup of coffee.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's good. I mean, that's solid anyway, because that way that kind of has a certain parameter. I mean, and sure enough, if you feel like it's going so well and you can't stop talking, that's one thing. But it's not rude to get up after the coffee, right? And a nice conversation. Whereas it's probably rude to get up after the, appetizers
Right.
in a restaurant. A whole meal takes a while.
It does.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the activity can actually provide its own boundaries.
Yeah. And having a hard stop. So if you even if the
Mhm.
even if you're going, so a drink can lead to a second drink and a third drink. So rather than doing that,
Yeah.
I would love to meet with you. Have about an hour and a half.
Hmm.
Is that too long for some introverts? Probably.
I, I mean, I think you need enough time to kind of get into a zone with a person. But yeah, I mean, you could even do an hour. Like,
Yeah.
I'd love to just have a short meeting. And would it work to do, you know, from this time to
Tomorrow
this time? Yeah.
tomorrow's a school day. I have to cut it early tonight, but I
Yeah.
really do want to meet you. Something
Yeah.
along those lines. So hard stops can be really helpful. I would
Mhm.
imagine that that would take so much pressure off that if there was a propensity for a real connection, person might actually want to extend it.
Yeah. And then it's easier to do that or say that, you know what, I'm really having a good time and maybe do you have a little more time? But yeah, I think that it's better to go less first and then more if you're gonna
Yeah.
change your mind.
Manage expectations. It's always easier to add more time than to give someone whiplash by saying, sorry, I'm out. You're
Yeah.
draining.
Yeah, and I mean, and the more that some honesty can be built into that, it's like, I think, my social battery is a little low right, these days, and I want to just, have, uh, I don't want to, yeah, I want to meet you. So, could we do a short meeting? Again, the more you can kind of cue that in a friendly way and not a labored way, the more you free up the other person, to kind of show ways that they understand and are similar.
That seems like really good hygiene, generally speaking, even if you're not an introvert, because I
Sure.
will tell
Yeah.
you there are times in my life where I'm just like not feeling like the beacon of hope that I would like to. And I'll have I don't wanna say, like, certainly not close friends, but, like, 3 levels removed on the outer layer of my circle, someone who's like, "Hey, I would just love to connect," and I'm like, "Dude, I am out because I
Mhm.
can't deliver at the level that they expect me to," and I
Right.
tend to see it in a binary way, like, either show up as Darcy or don't show up at all because you'll disappoint, and I certainly can't have any more life drained from me, at certain
Yeah.
times, and, it might not be a bad idea to just manage expectations and go into it somewhere within the bell curve and say, I'm not my social battery is quite drained. I do want to connect with you, but I don't have the
Right.
amount of time I normally would have. It's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Instead
Yeah.
of
I
waiting
think.
for perfection.
Right.
Yeah. Connecting dots left and right, Dr. Lori. That's what I'm doing
Oh,
today.
yeah. It's fun. Yeah. And I always connect too. Well, that's the beauty of conversation.
So, for introverts who feel discouraged or drained by today's dating culture, and I can only imagine how much, I mean, is it worse for introverts to date when in this online dating culture than it was to go to a bar and meet people when we were growing up? I mean, I don't know what's worse.
I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a lot of advantages in online dating for introverts. For one thing, introverts, because we like to think things through online, there's a natural pause, right? You can write your responses initially. You can have that kind of space. And we often like to express ourselves in writing more than write, especially off the cuff, verbally. And so I think that part, can be an advantage. I think, unfortunately, internet can get to be very kind of extroverted and overstimulating too. But I think there are some ways that actually it's freed introverts up to be more comfortable.
So, for introverts who do feel discouraged and drained by today's dating culture, what would you want them to know, especially the ones who are starting to wonder if dating is just not for them?
Well, one, don't expect it to be easy. I think think of it as a job. That helps. I think the thing that messes with introverts' heads so much is that somehow we're supposed to like it. Like maybe, work party. No, I will go because I want to be successful in my job. I'm not going to go because I'm going to enjoy it. And if I go with that idea that it's work, I can perform well, I can do what I need to do and get the benefits from it. So I think that's can get us off the hook. I think that also recognizing that there are a lot of assets to being an introvert. Having a poker face can be seductive. When they can't figure us out right away, that's mystery can be a really very alluring.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Somebody puts every card on the table that might not be a little bit much. So, and the fact that we are, comfortable being quiet, that we're receptive and we listen. And I'm not going to say every introvert's a great listener, but there is, again, that more receptive function that tends to be better developed with introverts. So those are advantages that recognize this is maybe the biggest one. Every other person in the room is an introvert. I think that there is this fallacy we carry around that extroverts are in the majority. It's not true.
I had no idea. You alluded to it earlier. You didn't finish the sentence. I was going to come back to it and I forgot to. I'm so glad that you mentioned it again. So the majority of people are introverts or some version thereof?
It's roughly half and half. But so when the Myers-Briggs was going into another iteration of updates, they did a national representative study. So they, trying to get the full kind of demographic of the US population. And so huge studies, more than one, that put actually introverts a little bit more, prevalent than extroverts, but roughly half and half.
So when you're looking around a room, you're not alone.
No.
You're not alone, introverts. You're in the majority, even if it's 1%.
Right. Let's take it.
That totally tracks with me. I mean, I don't identify as an extrovert. I am absolutely someone who thrives in small groups. But if you put, my ideal situation is one other couple, two other couples, three other couples max. If you go into four other couples, I am suddenly overstimulated and I'm not sure how to, I will work the room, but I'll do it in such a left-brained, spreadsheeted sort of way. Literally muscling through. I'm aware of who I've said hello to. I'm like checking boxes. I'm trying to make it look natural. I'm mostly doing it because I want people to feel cared about from me. It's for them. I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for them. But it's not scratching my itch when it's more than 6 people. I prefer 2 or 4 people. Assuming that I represent 2 people, me and Steph. But it's really nice it's very refreshing to think, oh, the whole world is not extroverted.
Yeah, and we just have so much, I think, misinformation about that through media, through whatever. And so the more the introverts kind of posture as extroverts, the more that gets messed with.
I'm sure people are confused to hear me say that I identify as a hybrid and I'm not an extrovert. I'm certain I'm not how I know my sister's an extrovert. And boy, her social battery has no bottom. She can work a room like no one I've ever met. And she is, when she's done, she is alive and lit. And she parts the sea when she walks into a room. And I'm just happy to be walking behind her so that she can open it. I'm just very grateful for my place.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have extroverts adopt. I have extroverts who have adopted me and, kind of introduced me, or, my husband will, definitely.
He pulls more weight for you, right?
Yeah, in those kinds of situations. And that's fine by me. Yeah. Let me sit back and think about things.
Dr. Laurie Helgoe, where can people learn more about you?
So my website is drlauriehelgoe.com, or it's easier if you want to just go to introvertpower.com, and everything really is there.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing some of your social battery with me and my listeners
Thank you.
today. I have found the conversation to be so valuable, and I think your work is marvelous. Thanks so much for what you
Oh,
do.
thank you so much.
It's really needed. It's really needed.
Yeah. Well, it's really gratifying to do this work. So I really appreciate you having me.
We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling is a Sterling Standard production. Editing and sound engineering is by Bart Begal. Our theme music is by Trendy Music. Special thanks to Amanda Cristiani, Robin Gentian, and Inez Gut. If you're watching on YouTube and you got something out of this episode, please do me a solid and like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps so much more than you can possibly know. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode packed with the relationship, dating, and mental health hacks you've come to expect. References are always linked in the show notes. I'll see you soon.